Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. We begin this hour in Washington, where President Trump will make a major announcement on the Iran nuclear deal today. A new CBS poll finds 57% of Americans say they actually don't know enough about the landmark agreement to have a clear opinion. However, 21% say the U.S. should remain in the deal, while another 21% say the U.S. should leave. Weijia Zhang has the latest from the White House.
European allies have desperately tried to change President Trump's mind, but they don't believe it worked. One diplomat tells CBS News the chance of this agreement staying intact is, quote, very small.
No matter where you go in the Middle East, wherever there's a problem, Iran is right there.
President Trump has not provided any details about what a U.S. withdrawal would look like.
My number one priority is to dismantle the disastrous deal with Iran.
But a pledge to renegotiate or dismantle the deal was one of his earliest campaign promises.
We took off the sanctions and we made this horrible deal.
President Trump has long said the agreement brokered under President Obama must also address Iran's ballistic missile program, inspections at military sites, and the sunset clause that would allow the country to restart some of its nuclear ambitions in 2025.
Negotiations involve give and take.
Last month, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif told Margaret Brennan his country would likely abandon the agreement if the U.S. pulled out.
If the benefits of the deal for Iran start to diminish, then there is no reason for Iran to remain in the deal.
But Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has said his country would be willing to stay if other countries involved played by the rules. European leaders have lobbied the president in person to uphold the accord. British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson visited Washington on Monday, even appearing to reach out to the president on Fox and Friends.
The president has been right to call attention to it. But you've got to do that without just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, without scrapping the whole thing.
President Trump had until Saturday to decide whether to continue waiving the sanctions. At this point, it seems the question is not if, but how he will reinstate them. Will he simply decline to waive the sanctions or issue new, even tougher ones? Tanya?
Weijia Zhang, thank you. I want to bring in CBS News State Department reporter Kylie Atwood. She is following the latest in Washington. Kylie, are you hearing anything new about what President Trump is likely to announce today at 2 p.m.?
Nothing new, but we do expect that he is going to begin orchestrating the U.S. exit of the Iran deal. And this isn't an easy thing to do. There are a lot of factors, and because of that, that allows the administration a lot of moving parts here in how it decides to orchestrate its exit. So, for example, one thing that we do expect Trump to do today, which would be more of a soft exit, is announce that he is not going to waive sanctions, which he should be waiving by May 12th. And those sanctions have actually allowed for the purchase of Iranian oil. Now, if he decides not to sign that sanctions waiver, then he will, in fact, encourage those companies, those entities that are buying that oil, not to buy oil from Iran anymore. Now, there's 180 days in which those sanctions could be slapped back on. We'll see when the administration decides a timeline for those sanctions. But Trump could also do a harder exit here, and he could announce that those sanctions are going to be slapped back on and more sanctions. And those would include sanctions on over 400 Iranian individuals and entities, and a lot of those do business with European entities at this point. So that would mean that Europeans are more involved in this decision, but we have yet to see, what Trump is actually going to decide. Right. The question here is how the U.S. decides to orchestrate this very complex exit.
So, Kylie, it sounds like President Trump has many options if he decides to withdraw the U.S. from this deal. It sounds like it could take many shapes.
Yeah, it could. And it could take a long time for the formal exit to actually come to fruition, which means that that also leaves open some negotiating time for the U.S. to keep open conversations with European partners who have been in discussions already with the U.S. the Trump administration on this deal and trying to encourage, obviously, the U.S. to stay in the deal. We saw Merkel here. We saw President Macron of France here trying to convince convince Trump to stay in the deal. It seems that they haven't been successful, but they still have an interest in trying to keep the U.S. as part of this and also trying to convince Iran to stay in the deal if the U.S. leaves.
Right. So if the U.S. leaves the deal in any capacity, is there any real threat from Iran? Could the country retaliate against the U.S. in any serious way that might damage us or our allies?
So we don't know exactly how Iran will react yet because they've given mixed signals. We saw the foreign minister of Iran, Zarif, tell Margaret Brennan, the host of Face the Nation, that they would restart their nuclear program if the U.S. exits the deal, meaning that Iran would also exit the deal. But then we've also seen other leaders of Iran say that they would stay in the deal if the U.S. exits. And some say that that would give Iran some leverage here because they would be part of a deal that the U.S. is no longer a part of. Kind of ironic. But we also, I talked to a former U.S. Senior administration official who laid out kind of the scary factors at play here, which is that Iran could retaliate in a number of ways. And I want to read you actually the quote from him because I thought it was really great. He said, "This is four-dimensional chess, and I just don't know if we have any four-dimensional chess players. What happens next? How do you get Iran to line up on future sanctions? How do you get Iran and the rest of the international community to trust the U.S. in terms of a future deal? How do you get the U.S. military resourced and authorized to fight this fight? And is there the possibility that we have Shia militia looking at our troops in a hostile manner?"
Right.
So will the U.S. need to be more militaristic in its stance against Iran if it leaves this deal? That's a question that he's throwing out there.
Kylie, we just heard from Weijia Zhang, who's saying that our allies don't seem too optimistic at this point that the U.S. is going to remain in the deal as it stands. So what have you heard is the latest reaction from our European allies?
Yeah, European allies are not expecting that the U.S. is going to stay in the deal, but they also didn't know that this announcement from Trump was going to come today. I spoke with Europeans yesterday who were surprised to see President Trump announce in a tweet that the announcement was coming today, which is 4 days ahead of the deadline. But European partners want to stay engaged with the U.S. And as I said before, they want to keep Iran in the deal. So some of them are actually meeting with the Iranians in Brussels today to be working on the other side of the deal as the U.S. orchestrates its exit.
Kylie Atwood in Washington, thank you.
Thanks, Hanya.